Tonight we dive into the catacombs of my collection to a guitar I purchased back in 2022. This is known as the Gibson La Tosca. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I decided to break this one out because we recently reviewed the Epiphone Spirit, which was a cool model that was later produced under the Gibson branding, but was essentially a new take on a double cut special, similar to a Hamer Standard that came out in 1977. A viewer of the show had left a comment on that video saying, how is the Spirit different from a La Tosca? To which I said, oh yeah, the La Tosca, I forgot about those things. So, this is a very early example of a dealer exclusive guitar. There's not a lot of information out there about these, but I'm going to do my best to paint the story to the best of my ability today. So nowadays, when we think about a dealer exclusive guitar, we're talking things like Guitar Center's Bats in Flight, or the Dark Knight, or even the current Epiphone Widows. We've got things like the AMS exclusive Blue Quilt Top Les Paul, Sweetwater with their Viper Blue hues. But when did dealer exclusives actually start? I don't exactly know. However, the earliest one that comes to my mind is all the way in the early 70s. It's the Sam Ash exclusive SG200. Normally those things had some weird single coil pickups, but that particular version got humbuckers and a matching headstock if memory serves. So that's circa 1972-ish, and believe it or not, Guitar Center was a player all the way back then. In 1977, I know that they had the 25th anniversary Les Paul customs to celebrate the true Les Paul 25th before the 2550s came out in 78. And then shortly around that time, you also had the Guitar Trader models. And then we get the La Toscas starting in 1978. That year is very, very important, because a lot of people might see these and think about the Hamer standards and say, Gibson ripped them off. But Musique La Tosca was a shop up in the Montreal, Canada area, and Guy A'Brassant, the other name you see on this, was a salesman. So I would assume this was his brainchild, and they made about 50 per year of production. The La Toscas were produced in 1978, 1979, and 1980. And you typically find them in a Cherry Sunburst finish or an antique Sunburst. I've also seen one in a red finish, but that's the thing about these. Even if you go to Google today in 2025, there's only ever been a handful of these to show up in photos. And it's usually just the same guitar at different shops. So who knows? There could be more. The one we're documenting today is a 1980, but they made approximately 50 per year and gave them a limited edition stamp. So this is the third one from the last batch. And by our vertical made in USA stamp, you can tell it is a Kalamazoo produced guitar. So Hamer coming to the NAMM show with the new standard, which is something that looks very similar to this. And then this coming out in 1978, that does seem suspicious, and that is one theory of how these things came to fruition. However, you have to remember those were inspired by the original DC Juniors and Specials that Gibson first created from 1959 through 62, typically in a TV yellow or a cherry finish. Those were a student grade level guitar. However, many pros picked them up because they loved the simplicity. And around this exact same time, it was influencing the start of another well-known brand today, PRS, with their custom 22, 24s, and similar models. However, I think it was those famous guys using them that was just making everybody want to do something like this, because in 1977, Gibson themselves brought back the DC Special in a reissue. However, it had the stop bar tailpiece set up. And even before then, you had like the double cut Melody Makers that they reissued around 1974. So this shape was on the way back in, I guess you could say. But if you look at one of those DC Special reissues, and then you come over to one of these La Toscas, you might just go, maybe he just went to Gibson and said, hey, I like what you're doing, but let's put a flame maple top on it, bind it on the body as well as the neck, give it an ebony fretboard. Hey, I heard you guys are doing these fancy Sustain Sisters and TP6 tailpieces. Let's give it those premium Schaller M6 style tuners. Make it a 3-piece maple neck, throw a volute on it just for good measure. It really is just a fanciful version of one of those. However, if you can't find one of these, as we were talking, the Gibson Spirit model, that is a much more affordable way to get something kind of similar to this. However, this is a very, very different guitar. Mahogany construction, again, the 3-piece maple neck, ebony fretboard. It's got the really fancy peg head veneer here, brass nut, believe it or not, that is stock. And please do not underestimate the importance of this model coming stock with P90 pickups. There were very few Gibson models to come stock with those in the 70s time period. Outside of what we've already talked about, you could find them in like the Pro Deluxe, as well as the early 70s SG Pro. And whether you prefer this to double cream Tim Shaw PAFs, I'll leave that that up to you. But to sum all that up in a couple of sentences, it was a dealer exclusive of a fancy double cut special when this shape was starting to become repopularized again. They're more so collector's items because they don't pop up too often. You're going to pay a premium for something like this today. My general first impressions of this one is it's really heavy. It doesn't feel like it's going to be that good, but you never know. I really like the last one I documented. It was an antique sunburst, so if you want to check that episode out, you can. Viewing that video back, that one played excellently. But to learn more about the individual specs of this one, let's go ahead and throw it onto the workbench. Inside our Cherry La Tosca, there's one more thing that makes this very different from the later Spirit models. In that episode, I was talking about how they don't have a full thickness top like when we think of a Les Paul. The tops on these are even thinner, to the point where at first glance you might just think, that's just a straight up veneer, because that's just the mahogany body. However, unlike the last one I documented, I can actually see how thick it is on here. I measure approximately 0.16 inches. So you tell me, do you count that as a veneer or just a really thin top? However, it is important to keep in mind, this is the 3-piece top era. A 1-piece top is relatively unheard of. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't exist. In fact, here's a really fun episode about a 1-piece top Les Paul. But generally speaking, you would be considered lucky or buying a limited edition like a Les Paul KM to get a 2-piece center seam. So it definitely seems fishy when they can produce 50 guitars a year that have the whole 1-piece top thing, but this later on went to influence models such as the CMT versions of the V, as well as the Explorer E2, as well as some basses. So consider this a humble beginning. But check out our neck pickup cavity. Here's something else you don't see every day in the Norland era. It has a long neck tenon. Could they have gotten away with just setting the neck right here? Maybe, but it's definitely better to have a little bit more coming through here. And then we've got these 4 bored holes. The reason for those is when you first open up the cavity, you have a base plate. Now you might say, hey, that looks like what Gibson uses today. The difference being the 4 holes right here stick out proud on the backside, so they needed that route out of the body because it helps it stay in place, and then they utilize 2 screws to secure it. That's what these 2 holes are in our neck pickup cavity. And then from there we've got a wire channel route running underneath here, but check out how large those base plate screws are. They certainly have quite a profile to them at the top, and if we can believe the documentation of my last one, these likely shipped with foam pads, but they might have broke down on this example because you can see the residue from them being there. But when I pulled these out, there were some pretty heavy duty springs put in there. I've never seen this style used on a Gibson before. But speaking of the pickup, I always love 70s P90s because they use a clear bobbin, so you get to see the copper colored winding. And in fact, in the early 70s, they used green, and that's always been cool to me too. So if you wanted a strange futuristic look, you could take off your pickup covers and just leave it like that. But that makes it really easy to see the construction of a P90. So you've got your windings all taped up there, and then you can see your magnets here. I would like to make mention that these magnets are ridiculously powerful. And now our bridge pickup appears to have had something spilled on it at one point in time. When I first opened this up, I thought, uh-oh, did somebody cut their hand? I honestly don't know what it is, but most of it cleaned up okay. But this does appear to be the original pickup set. However, you know what that might actually be? It appears somebody might have wax potted this at one point in time. Then they did some minor modifications down here to keep your lead in place. So that might just be remnants of whatever candle they decided to melt down. I mean, now that I look at it, the neck pickup has such nice even winds. This one looks a little crazier. Possible this was rewound at some point. Let's see, bridge reads 8.36, neck position 8.01, and they play together at 409. So everything seems good there. But here's a full look at our bridge pickup cavity before we put its base plate back in. Notice this one was drilled for 4 holes. So I wonder if that happened when they messed with the pickup. But the other cool thing about there being 4 bored holes already is technically you can try a mini humbucker in here because their securing legs are over here, and normally you'd have to drill the body just a little bit, but that was already done for you. So that's an option out there for somebody who prefers mini humbuckers or wants a combination instead of just straight up P90s. Or laid back, as these were called back then. But moving on from our pickups, let's talk bridge and tailpiece. So earlier I used the term sustain sisters. What that is it's a big brass block that your thumb post goes into. It's supposed to give you better sustain. And they had a smaller version of that around your tailpiece studs as well. So that's why that looks larger than normal. But as far as your bridge itself, it's just your regular Nashville style one. They were made for Gibson by Schaller at this time. Then this one just has a regular full weight tailpiece. Typically, these early La Toscas will have a TP6, which would look something like this that has the fine tuners. Remember earlier how I said that we haven't actually had visual confirmation of that many La Toscas? I'm sure there were small variations between each run. It's possible they decided to go stop bar. It's also possible somebody said, hey, I don't like a TP6. Because personally, I love the way these things look, but I hate the way they make the guitar feel. It changes your break angle. But that is an error-correct tailpiece. But whether or not you want to put a TP6 on it one day, I would leave that to the next guy. But here's another big difference. Usually you'll find some sort of a speed knob on these. However, in 1980, we get the introduction of my favorite knobs ever, so this one just happens to have those. Now, is it possible somebody bought these aftermarket, put it on? Maybe, but I can also see it being equally as probable that, hey, you want to try this new knob, Guy? And he tells Gibson, yeah, that'd look great. Because these came out in 1980 for the Heritage series. They were a 59 reissue style. But you got bridge volume and tone, neck volume and tone, 3-way toggle switch. Both of my La Toscas have been set up like this. Whether that was factory or not, we'll have to document more. When I bought this one, it was described as a 9 out of 10, all original, good stuff. I was always kind of disappointed when I first got this one because I just sold that beautiful tobacco one. It's like the next one of those that shows up, I need to buy one again. So I jumped on the Cherry Sunburst, and basically I've just found more issues than the dealer did not disclose. Like, for example, the bridge pickup's been messed with a little bit. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I'm selling this or not, but I'm going to document the condition anyways. We got a couple of dings right here on the top. Otherwise, it polished out pretty good. Small little dimple right there. And we've got a good splattering of small nicks over here in the center portion. Got a larger scuff there. Couple of dings on the edge. And for our picking area, I'm actually surprised how few scratches and dings we have. The worst one is definitely that. It kind of stands out. Then we have some significant scuffs and lines along the edge, especially right here where a player's arm would rest. We also have a small paint fleck right here. I thought for sure that was going to clean off, but no, it almost feels like it's under the finish. Oh, and we might as well talk about the elephant in the room, the very bold Cherry Sunburst finish. That's one thing about the La Tosca runs, though, is they're very consistent. They have a nice teardrop shape to them, but they do have a very wide border. So kind of an acquired taste when it comes to Cherry Sunburst, but it is one of the more rare finish for this model, that we know of anyway. But we can move on from that mahogany body with thin maple layer to our 3-piece maple neck, and it is indeed a true ebony fretboard. For whatever reason, in the late 70s, Gibson was like, oh, this thing has P90s, we better put an ebony fretboard on it. When you get it in the discerning light, it looks like somebody might have leveled and recrowned these frets at some point, because you can see some minor tooling marks. Is it possible it left the factory with them? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just disclosing it. But I went ahead and polished these frets and conditioned our board. And to me, it looks like the dot inlays are slightly this way. But that's how my last one was too. But it's your typical low, wide frets of the era. And we do have the binding along the edge that has the typical light fret sprout cracks to it. And being a Kalamazoo build, yes, we do indeed have the tortoiseshell side markers. It's also important to note that it's real mother of pearl for our dot inlays. That is another feature that makes this very special. But check out our brass nut. That's always one of my favorite things to do on these late 70s guitars that have them. The polishing of that just makes them look so good. And when those are cut well, you usually don't have to do anything to them. But that one measures 1.71 inches, increasing to 2.066 at the 12th. And your typical skinniness, 0.79 first fret neck depth. And wow, that's skinny even for skinny standards. 0.88 12th fret. If you like wide thin, you're going to enjoy this. However, it's not super thin. It still has a nice rounded C shape to it. Here that is on the contour gauge, first fret and 12th fret. But now our headstock. This actually polished up quite beautifully. I would say minimal wear and tear on the front, but you don't have any Les Paul model silk screen or anything like that. All that was reserved for our truss rod cover. But first, underneath it, you can see your maple neck as well as your acorn nut for your truss rod. And here's our truss rod cover. It's engraved. That's really a big deal here. So they took the black layer, carved through it to reveal the back white layer. And they pretty much stopped doing that by the mid-70s, so that was something special that Guy requested. But it reads La Tosca Exclusive in cool font, and then the salesman's name. Good luck finding one of those if you happen to be missing it, as it was likely the late great Maudie Moore who did those up on her pantograph machine. But now we move on to the back, where some of my other frustrations came from. I like listings that come out and tell you everything that's been replaced. Like, I had forgotten about these usually having a TP6 tailpiece, so that would have been nice to know. And then I just saw, oh yeah, there's a strap button here, there's a strap button there, we're good to go. But now, yeah, somebody's added this strap button, and that always annoys me. Like, I get it, they do it for balance reasons, but this is the correct positioning for the original strap button, as weird as it is. But somebody's also upgraded those with Schaller strap locks in both of the usual locations, and filled that in with a regular. But here's another fun thing to know about this one. Good or bad, I'll let you decide, but somebody has engraved their name into it. Barry. Now, I don't think that happened at the factory. And it looks like he put his initials right here too, BD. As far as the pots, this one dates to the 53rd week of 1979. This one's a bit covered over, but looks about the same. This one is completely covered. And this one is the 10th week of 1980. In this era, usually these two will match and these two will match, so I don't think anything's been played with there. We've got our yellow disc capacitors. And as far as the solder work, everything looks about right to me. I could maybe question that one. Looking at my other one, the wiring looks just a little bit different, and this being the bridge pickup area, I guess it could make sense that somebody else decided to wire it like that. But again, we have a very small sample size here. It could just be somebody at the factory decided to wire it a bit differently. But these have a very interestingly shaped back plate, and the back side of it looks like so, and it secures utilizing 5 screws. But if we turn our brightness down here a little bit, you can see what you see in person. All that beautiful mahogany wood grain appears to be one piece, and the back is littered with dings, some minor buckle worming, some impressions and scratches. But out of all the La Toscas that have shown up, usually they're really beat up, so I've yet to see an actual mint condition one. But personally, you know, with the added strap button and some of the uncertainties with the bridge pickup, I'd probably call this like a 7.5 to 8. Still a nice collectible example for this model, but was definitely used. Here's the other side we didn't see earlier. You've got some light scuffs over here. Actually, that was just polishing compound, but you do have a couple of dings, as well as some dings over here, and a metal output jack plate. And in case you're curious, the body is about 1.75 inches thick. Now moving up the back side of the neck, it's a little hard to see, but it is a 3-piece maple one with our giant honkin' volute that Kalamazoo loved to do in the late 70s. And then our Gibson branded Schaller tuners, which were deluxe back in the day and have held up incredibly well. And here we can see our Made in USA stamp again, as well as our limited edition number 3. Then here's something else that's not really a deal breaker necessarily, but would have been nice to know. The serial number wasn't stamped very good. Like, we can make out the last 3 just fine, 018. So that tells us it's number 18 off the production line, and then we have a 0, and then what looks like a 9 and a 6. And now I do see a 2 before that. So what it actually is 82690, making it 1980 on the 269th day of the year, and then the 018 for our production. But that first 8 is very, very, very faint. Now, if there were finished discrepancies around there, then I would be scared. However, I have seen this a time or two. In fact, I think I have a 1980 Les Paul Artisan in my collection, probably around this serial number range that has the same thing. It's always bugged me about it, but it's a beautiful guitar. But we've got a ding in the finish right here, as well as up here in the corner. Maybe it's more of a 7 on my picky scale, but it did clean up beautifully. But a good way to check for monkey business is a blacklight test. I would say the face is absolutely perfection. And the body, the obnoxious Cherry Sunbursts always look good, with a whole bunch of green over top. This once again confirms that that's the worst ding right there in that area. We've got a little bit of sweat absorption here. But it's kind of cool to see the shadowing difference from our tailpiece and stuff being installed. There's a few more of those dings we were talking about earlier. But there we go. Perfect back here. and it's glowing the way I would expect to see, but whoa. I don't remember seeing that in regular lighting situations, so that might be a minor touch-up. We'll have to take a look at that again. But the back side of the neck is good, and we can see that's the original nut. It's got the lacquer on it. And I bring that up because there is a little bit of finish missing along the edge over here, so it's possible that might have needed reworked a little bit at one point, or it could just be the wood moving, and this being made of brass doesn't want to move, so the finish chipped. But the neck's actually really clean in our playing areas. And here's what the back side looks like. Shows off our major dings. And we can look at our sides. Neck pocket all looks good to me. Just dings. And those scuffs. Here that is in regular lighting. I see it now. I just missed it. It's a small finished clear coat chip. But this new lighting situation helps you see the 3-piece maple neck. And I wanted to show you the edges of the nut in another lighting. Thankfully, the ugly side's the one that you do not see while playing. All said and done, strung back up, it weighs 8 pounds, 11.7 ounces. That is quite chunky for a double cut. But hey, let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. There's a band on YouTube called La Tosca something Chicago playing at a library. Go ahead and check them out. That was me attempting to do something like that. It seemed fitting with the name. Now we'll do some more traditional tones. You guys figure out what's wrong? That confirms somebody was playing with that bridge pickup. They put the magnets in backward. It gives you a quacky out of phase tone. Now that could have also been on purpose, because some guys do like that. But just like my first La Tosca, the neck pickup is just so much more round and full. It sounds great. But then the bridge in comparison on cleans, got a bit of a twang to it, but it's not as powerful as that neck. And it's not necessarily from pickup heights either, but the out of phase is interesting. Now we'll kick on some dirt. Sounds great. However, you can tell it's definitely microphonic. Which at these levels, it's not so bad, but if you're playing a big stadium, that is gonna squeal like crazy. Same thing with the neck pickup, but it's just so smooth and laid back. But how's Quacky out of phase with dirt? Actually sounds pretty all right. So there we go, a Cherry Sunburst La Tosca. What are my final thoughts? When I first pulled it out of the case, even when I first got it, I was like, this one's quite heavy. Doesn't feel like it's going to be that good of a guitar. However, I was actually quite impressed with the tones. Just like that last one, I had a great time once I started playing it. So if you can get a 70s P90 equipped guitar, I think you're going to enjoy it. That neck pickup is just its own secret sauce, dirty and clean. But this bridge pickup, while not doing much clean for rock tones necessarily, once you throw some dirt on it, you're having a lot of fun, as long as you don't mind some microphonic tendencies. Ultimately, would I suggest for the average player to pick up a La Tosca? Probably not. Everything I just said, the pickups are fantastic. You might want it just for that because there's not that many stock P90 models out of Gibson in this particular era. But a Gibson Spirit will get you quite close for a lot less money and are way more readily available. However, they are vastly different guitars. This still feels more like a double cut Les Paul that just doesn't have its carved top, whereas a Spirit feels more close to the actual juniors or specials that it was trying to replicate. So were there a few surprises on this one? Sure, but it's kind of a rare model, not that many out there, so beggars can't necessarily be choosers, I guess. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed checking out a La Tosca again in a new finish in my updated review style. If you're interested in being the next owner of this one, feel free to reach out, but I don't think I'd be able to replace this with a cleaner one in short notice, so I think I'll just hold on to it as I have been the past couple of years, as it's one of those Norland era oddity models. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed, learned something new, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.